Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. This is a preview and prediction video for 5 heavyweight fights which feature on the Joe Smith Jr. and Maxim Vlasov undercard. So apologies, I'm getting to this a little bit late in the piece. So the weigh-in has occurred, so I can sort of touch on that, and some interesting things coming out of it for at least Jared Anderson and Sonny Conto, career high weights, but we'll get to that. But we'll start off with Efe Ajagba. So he was 239.6 pounds on the scale. His opponent, Brian Howard, 218 pounds. So this fight between Ajagba and Howard is the co-main event. So this is actually a big stage for Efe Ajagba, and he needs a good performance. He needs to show some progression, because certainly in the past year or so, maybe a little longer, people have started to call on his potential, where he's going. Also in that time, since a couple of shaky-ish performances dropped by Iago Kaladze, and also sort of labouring at times in different fights, he's changed trainers, but also he's moved promotional outfits, going from the PBC to Top Rank. So he's got an opportunity here as the co-main event. He's now sort of bedded in with his new trainer, Kei Karoma, or not so new now, but sort of you want to see some development here. And I think he has been a guy, and I've said this, you know, right throughout as he started to have some fights where he was tested. Ali Aaron Demirezhin, you also had Iago Kaladze, Razvan Kajanu. They were good learning fights, right fights at the right time, in my opinion. Maybe it didn't do, you know, great things for his hype and his buzz and where he was going, but he needed some of those tests to really build on what he had been doing. So I want to see a little bit of progression here. And I guess in Brian Howard, it's not necessarily the best ever style matchup for him, because Ajagba earlier in his career excelled when he had guys who were right there in front of him, who he could sort of punch and knock over. That's kind of where he started to build all that big hype. And then obviously he had an opponent, Cortes, who walked out of the ring. But in Brian Howard, he will beat him. And make no mistake, this is being set up as a showcase fight. But it might be a little bit more tricky and awkward for Ajagba early on, because Brian Howard, a former cruiserweight who is at 218 pounds for this fight, he can actually move and make it a little awkward. And we did see that in that Frank Sanchez fight early on, the first couple of rounds. Howard was hard to catch up with. He was on the move. He was a bit negative. He was just sort of noodling the fight a little bit. He really wasn't engaging all that much. And when he was starting to get clipped. But Sanchez and Ajagba, different fighters. Frank Sanchez, much more nimble on his feet, quicker hands, quicker feet. Efe Ajagba, you know, sometimes he looks like he's sort of stepping through molasses to get where he wants to go. So early on, you could see Howard sort of using the ring and making it a little bit difficult for Efe Ajagba to catch up with him. And I'm sure, though, it'll eventually happen. But before that, we may have a few rounds where maybe there's not a lot of action. Maybe Howard is sort of sniping in and out, not having a lot of success. But, you know, he could end up, though, in the process of, if he does engage with Ajagba, he could walk onto something. So we could totally see that. But this is designed to be a showcase fight. It's on a big stage, you know, good sort of potential audience for this fight. A lot of people are looking forward to the main event, Joe Smith Jr. and Maxim Vlasov. So Ajagba needs a good performance. We need to start seeing that progression if he is to continue to that next stage where he can start to compete with fringe contenders and that sort of thing, because maybe he's another year or so away from that level, but we need to see the progression now. Howard was stopped by Sanchez in about 4 rounds or so, and he was basically, from the first big shot that landed, you know, his legs weren't there against Sanchez. So we could see something similar here, but maybe it'll be a little bit awkward early on. But so I don't mind the style matchup. You know, it gives Ajagba something a little bit different, something, you know, crack the code on that. But maybe some people won't like everything that they see from Efe Ajagba, and they will still be, okay, well, he's going nowhere in the heavyweight division. I still think when you consider who he's been fighting, the level of opposition, he's got one of the better records of prospects coming through right now. I think some people have been a little bit hard on him, but maybe the ceiling isn't as high. Maybe it'll just take him a little bit longer to get where he needs to go. We'll have to see, but he should win this one. Okay, the next fight, Jared Anderson versus Jeremiah Karpency. So the 8-0 Anderson, in my view, is one of, if not the best American heavyweight prospect coming through right now. In Karpency, he's got a guy who's effectively been a bit of a part-time fighter in recent years. Hasn't fought that much. The last time he was in the ring was almost 2 years ago. He's got a record of 16-2-1, so on the face of it, it looks, like a credible opponent. And for the stage of his career, for Anderson, I think it is a fine opponent. It is sort of still on that level of the Kingsley Ebays, the Luis Pena, Rodney Hernandez, that sort of level. That's where he's been fighting at, and I expect this fight and others in the next year or so to be of a similar level as they slowly progress him in the heavyweight division. There's no rush with this guy in Anderson, 21 years old, 8-0 at the moment, 8 KOs. He's got a big future in front of him. It's one of those things I think if they can take the time, they should take the time, because there is no rush. We're in a pandemic. It's a little bit of a weird situation. There's a glut sort of and a clogging at the top of the heavyweight division with title fights and potential title fights. This guy's probably 2 or 3 years away from that, so they can build him all they like. It is one of these fights I think he will get a stoppage, but maybe there will be something that Karpency can just push him for a bit, give him some rounds, some action. But Anderson, 251.8 on the scale, that is his heaviest weight. Bear in mind, he's a guy at 6'4". I'm looking at that going, often guys who are around 6'4", there or thereabouts, once they start going over 245, there seems to be, especially if they start cracking 250 and beyond, diminishing returns and for speed, for hand speed and foot speed. They start to maybe be a bit too bulky for that sort of height. So it'll be something to keep an eye on going forward. It's probably not going to affect him here against Karpency, who's a smaller heavyweight. Anderson's got the height and the reach. Karpency 6'1". But it's 6 or 8 rounds of action. Actually, in the bout sheet, it hasn't got that made up, so they must be making the decision on the night. I would say it'll end up being 8 rounds, but we shall see. But Anderson to win this, and it's another opportunity for him for some rounds, experience, and another, to an extent, showcase fight, because this is the second fight from the top of the bill. So, interesting that he's so high up here on this card. World Championship fight topping the bill. Further down the card, so we've still got 3 more heavyweight fights just to quickly traverse. You have Trey Lippe Morrison. He'll be facing Jason Bergman. So Morrison, he's a local guy. He's been brought in, obviously, to help either sell tickets or just local interest, that sort of thing. So Morrison, at the moment, is an undefeated guy. And it's interesting because 16-0, but there really is a lack of a sort of breakthrough type of fight or performance. He's kind of been toiling away in obscurity. Jason Bergman, who maybe is not as good as he once was. He's used to be known as the Iron Man, that sort of thing. It's still his nickname. 27 wins, 19 losses. He's sort of seen better days now and has been getting sort of stopped quite early in some recent fights. I mean, the Arslanbek Makhmudov one comes to mind too. But Morrison is a guy, hard to know really how good he is. The son of Tommy Morrison. He's also got a brother, Kinsey Morrison, who fights as well. He was a guy, and I haven't done the video yet, and I was intending to and still will at some point, so we'll see how this goes. Are they a contender or pretender? Because he's got one of these sort of pretty records, 16-0. I just don't really know how good he is. And Bergman probably is on a par with some of the better guys that he's fought, so it's not necessarily a step up of sorts, but at least we'll get to see him on a broadcast card, and we can get a bit more of a read on him. And bearing in mind, he's 31 years old now, he's unbeaten at this point, kind of needs to hit the go button if he's going to do anything in the heavyweight division's got to step it up. But at least, this is a bit of a marker in the sand. He should win this one, but it wouldn't surprise me if Bergman does, actually pose a few problems, because Bergman, at least at one point in time, was decent. He was a really solid and tough journeyman. Maybe some of the durability has diminished, but he's still got okay skills, and he can make it a bit, tough and awkward, and sometimes, a bit negative, and makes it harder to get him out of there. But, Morrison to win this one. Another local guy who's been brought onto this card is Jeremiah Milton, who's been quite a popular sparring partner in the past year or so. Sparred the likes of Daniel Dubois, more recently Michael Hunter, Jonathan Rice, that sort of stuff. He is going to be facing Jayvone Dafney, who's 2-2. So Milton at this point a record of 2-0. So obviously this sort of fattens out the card. He should get the win here. And Sonny Conto, the top-ranked prospect, he is currently 6-0. He returns after quite a lengthy absence. Hasn't been in the ring for some time, but there had been injuries and that. But interestingly, on the scale, 230 pounds. So he's a guy who was always, with those previous fights when you saw him weigh in somewhere between 214, 218, you sort of thought, could he make cruiserweight? Is that really more his thing? But he certainly, in the past year or so, has started to just fill out a bit. And for a guy who's listed as 6'4", 230, he still, you see here, he still looks a pretty sort of slight sort of figure compared to some other heavyweights. But yeah, that was a career high by about 11 pounds or so. So that was quite interesting to me. But clearly has been putting some more effort in the gym, in the weight room, that sort of stuff. And he's a guy with good skills, good speed. I don't think those 10 pounds is going to do too much to him. I think Conto, he's going to go in here against Waldo, Cortes, Acosta, who weighed 262. It's a showcase fight for him. It's sort of almost a welcome back. He's had a bit of injury. There was also a fight he was meant to be in earlier this year. It didn't happen. His opponent pulled out. So, yeah, we get to see him back in. He can sort of get things rolling again, try to build a little bit of momentum. But Jeremiah Milton to win, Trey Lippe Morrison to win, Sonny Conto to win, Jared Anderson to win, and Efe Ajagba to win as well. All these guys are the favourites. They should win. What do you make of this card and the potential test the opponents that they've got in front of them? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.